Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a document that's definitely got people talking in the digital asset world, one submitted to the SEC, and, given our whole mission here is to really understand the details of this evolving landscape, we felt we just had to take a proper look.
Exactly. And this proposal, it's titled XRP, the future backbone of U.S. finance. It's attributed to Maximilian Staudinger, and like you said, it's right there on the SEC's website for anyone to find. So what we really want to do today is get past the sort of surface level takes and really unpack what this blueprint could mean. For the U.S. financial system, and maybe more importantly, for anyone trying to make sense of digital assets, it outlines a pretty bold vision.
Oh, it absolutely does. A very bold vision. This thing basically imagines XRP shifting from, what many people see as a speculative asset into maybe becoming a key piece of the actual U.S. financial plumbing. Our discussion today is going to lean heavily on that document from the SEC site. We're also looking at some informational summaries that Newsroom Chella Smith Eco Future Wealth shared just to help crystallize the main ideas. And, we always have to say this, but it's crucial. This is purely informational. It's absolutely not financial advice.
Agreed. Can't stress that enough. So, okay, let's dive into the main argument of this proposal. It really talks about a fundamental change for XRP. So instead of primarily being, this digital thing traded back and forth on exchanges, the idea here is it could become a foundational tool for the big financial players. We're talking banks, even government agencies in the U.S.
Okay, right. Let's just try and grasp the sheer scale of that idea. If XRP actually moved into that kind of fundamental infrastructure role, the implications for demand, they'd have to be huge, wouldn't they? It's moving way beyond just market feeling into actual concrete use.
Precisely. That potential switch to real utility, it gives you a totally different lens to view XRP's value through. Instead of just, ups and downs based on trading sentiment, its value could get tied much more closely to how many transactions it's actually handling, how much trust it builds within the existing financial systems. That could mean a more stable and potentially much more significant long-term value driver.
And this is where the proposal really, really swings for the fences. It talks about unlocking trillions in capital, using XRP to replace some of these global Nostro accounts. Now, for listeners maybe not familiar, could you just quickly explain what a Nostro account is, and then maybe walk us through what the proposal sees happening?
Sure, yeah. So Nostro accounts, think of them basically as accounts that one bank holds at another bank, but in a foreign currency. They're absolutely essential for making international payments happen. And globally, there's just a massive amount of money tied up in these accounts. The figure mentioned is around $27 trillion. U.S. banks hold about $5 trillion of that total. Now, the proposal suggests something pretty radical, replacing about 30% of those Nostro balances specifically held by U.S. banks with XRP.
Wow. Okay, so 30% of $5 trillion, my math isn't lightning fast.
Well,
that's
yeah.
$1.5 trillion, potential $1.5 trillion in liquidity getting freed up. What would that do to XRP itself, given, its limited supply?
Well, the demand side for XRP could really shift dramatically. For a system like that to work, financial institutions would need to buy and hold quite large amounts of XRP. So this increased buying from institutions hitting up against that fixed supply of XRP, it could absolutely create a major supply squeeze, potentially putting, significant upward pressure on the price. And it's also worth thinking about the current system, the Nostro system. It's not always efficient, right? You've got settlement times, different middlemen fees. This proposal is essentially arguing XRP could be faster, cheaper, more streamlined.
The proposal doesn't stop there, though. It also gets into cost savings, pretty big ones, and even floats the idea of using XRP for, everyday government payments. Can you break those down?
Yeah, absolutely. The document estimates potential savings annually of around $7.5 billion just in transaction fees. That's if XRP gets adopted for cross-border stuff instead of the old way using Nostro accounts. But beyond that, yes, it does explore using XRP for routine government payouts, things like your IRS tax refund or Social Security payments.
That would be a fundamental change, wouldn't it, in how just ordinary people interact financially with the government. It takes XRP from being this thing traded online to being woven into the fabric of the financial system.
Exactly. That kind of integration, it could provide a really steady, large volume of transactions for the XRP ledger, which could, anchor its usefulness in everyday finance for citizens, making it less dependent purely on market speculation.
Okay, now a big elephant in the room for XRP for a while has been regulatory clarity,
Yeah.
or the lack of it. How does this proposal try and tackle that? That seems pretty critical.
It's absolutely critical, and the proposal treats it that way. It's really a central pillar. It basically argues for pretty decisive action from the top of the executive branch, the Treasury, to clear the air. Specifically, it asks for things like executive orders, Treasury mandates, to do a few key things. Settle the ongoing SEC case first off, lift this reported contact ban from the Department of Justice, and crucially, formally classify XRP as a payment token, not a security.
Right. And if, obviously, but if those regulatory clouds parted, what kind of effect could that have on XRP's adoption here in the U.S.?
Oh, it could be genuinely transformative. Just resolving the SEC case and getting that clear label payment token, that alone could massively boost investor confidence in the US. It would almost certainly open the door to wider access, getting relisted on the big exchanges, better custody options becoming available, and probably encouraging more institutional money to come in, investors who've understandably been sitting on the sidelines because of all the uncertainty.
There's another really interesting part of this proposal, too, connecting XRP to the U.S. strategy around Bitcoin. Can you explain how that fits in?
Yeah, that's a particularly striking part of it. It suggests a kind of synergy, right, between the capital that could be freed up by using XRP for those Nostro accounts we talked about, and the idea of the U.S. building up a significant Bitcoin reserve. The proposal actually throws out a number using some of that estimated $1.5 trillion in unlocked liquidity to potentially buy around 25 million Bitcoin strategically.
So the logic is make global payments more efficient with XRP and then use the unlocked capital to get a strategic foothold in the Bitcoin market. Is that the idea?
That's essentially the concept, yes. It explicitly links XRP's potential usefulness to, high-level U.S. macroeconomic strategy, which, if it ever happened, would give XRP a huge dose of legitimacy at the highest financial and political levels. It's proposing this sort of strategic dance, where XRP's efficiency helps enable the acquisition of another major digital asset.
And the timeline they sketch out for all this integration, it's incredibly fast. They're talking about full federal integration within, 6 to 12 months? How on earth did they see that happening so quickly?
Yeah, the proposal itself admits that hitting that kind of timeline would require, frankly, unprecedented coordination and buy-in across government. It specifically calls for a presidential executive order just to kick things off. Then, really quick rollout of pilot programs, backed by the Treasury, to test it all in the real world. And ultimately, it would need actual mandates from the big regulators, the Fed, the OCC, to push for widespread adoption.
That is incredibly ambitious for something this massive. I mean, if even part of that happened that fast, the effect on people holding XRP could be
significant, yeah. As the proposal argues, it would be a remarkably fast track for institutional adoption. XRP could potentially go from where it is now to being part of the national financial plumbing in a very, very short time, which no doubt would have major consequences for anyone holding it.
Okay, but before anyone listening gets carried away and thinks this is a done deal, we absolutely have to stress a really, really important caveat about where this document stands right now.
Absolutely essential point, yes. It is so important for everyone to understand that right now, this proposal seems to be just that, a proposal, an aspirational one. It's been submitted for consideration, yes. Its presence on the SEC website confirms that submission, but that does not mean it's official U.S. policy. It's not a plan regulators are committed to enacting at this point.
So, yeah. It paints this very detailed, maybe even exciting picture, especially if you're interested in XRP, but its actual implementation is absolutely not guaranteed. Far from it.
That's exactly right. It's a vision, a potential path. However, as the proposal itself kind of hints, even if policymakers decided to pick up just certain pieces of this blueprint, adopt to some elements, that could still potentially lead to pretty interesting developments and maybe benefits for XRT holders.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then, we've looked closely at this proposal submitted to the SEC, one that lays out a possibly transformative future for XRP, shifting it potentially from an asset traded openly into maybe a core piece of the U.S. financial engine.
We've touched on the big ideas, boosting XRP's utility and demand through Nostro accounts, government payments, even that intriguing link to a potential U.S. Bitcoin strategy, and of course the need for regulatory clarity, plus that very ambitious timeline for potential federal integration.
And as we've hit on a few times now, really important to keep this in mind while it's a fascinating, maybe even groundbreaking vision. It is currently just a proposal, not set in stone policy. So, as always, this chat is just for information. Please do your own homework, Talk to a qualified financial advisor before making any decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about the sheer size, the inertia of the traditional financial system we have now, but also think about how fast technology is moving. What are some of the really unexpected ways that digital assets like XRP or others might actually weave themselves into our economy in the coming years? It's definitely a space worth watching and thinking critically about.